Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into a story that's both fascinating and pretty gruesome.
Yeah, it really highlights just how brutal the past could be.
It sure does. We're talking about a mass grave discovered in Mongolia just north of the Great Wall of China.
And get this, it's like 2,100 years old.
That's ancient. So, what can you tell us about this discovery? What makes it so significant?
Well, it's not just a simple grave, it's a jumbled mess of bones, at least 17 individuals. And there are signs of real violence.
Violence? Like what kind of violence?
We're talking bludgeoning, dismemberment, even decapitation. Some of the skulls were found separated from the bodies.
Yikes, that's a pretty grim picture you're painting. So, who are these unfortunate individuals?
That's the big mystery, right? Were they soldiers from the Han Dynasty pushing northwards? Or were they Xiongnu warriors defending their land?
Okay, so we've got this ancient battlefield, a clash of empires, and a mass grave full of unanswered questions. Where do we even begin to unravel this?
Well, the location of this grave is key. It's near an ancient fortress called Bayanbulag. And figuring out who controlled this fortress could tell us a lot about who these people were and how they died.
So Bayanbulag is like our central puzzle piece. This fortress held strategic importance during the Han Xiongnu Wars, right? Wars that essentially shaped the course of East Asian history for centuries. But we're looking at a period where the historical record is heavily biased towards the Han perspective.
Exactly. The Xiongnu, they didn't have their own written language, so their side of the story is often lost or misrepresented.
Which makes archaeological discoveries like this even more important. It's a chance to hear those unheard voices, to get a more balanced perspective on this ancient conflict.
Absolutely. And that's where this new study published in the Journal of Archaeological Science comes in. It uses a multidisciplinary approach, combining genetics, geology, anthropology, you name it, to try and get to the bottom of who these people were.
So, in this deep dive, we're going to break down the findings of this study. We'll look at the evidence, the analysis, and ultimately what it reveals about the Han Xiongnu Wars and the lives of these individuals.
Sounds like a plan.
Now, you mentioned that Bayanbulag itself is a fascinating site. Let's start there. Where is it located and what do we know about it?
Bayanbulag is in southern Mongolia, north of the main defenses of the Great Wall. Initially, some researchers thought it might have been a Xiongnu fortress, based on its location and some early findings.
But the study seems to suggest otherwise, right? What kind of evidence points to a Han Dynasty origin for this fortress?
Right. So as excavations continued, they started uncovering more and more artifacts that were distinctly Han Chinese. Things like pottery, iron tools, even weapons and coins from the Han Dynasty.
And that's pretty conclusive, isn't it? I mean, finding Han Dynasty artifacts in a fortress suggests they were the ones who built it, or at least occupied it.
It's strong evidence. But there's one find in particular that's really interesting. It's a clay seal with an inscription. It says, Yi Shi Swan.
Ji Heswan, what does that mean?
Well, Xi refers to the Xi Commandery, which was an administrative region in what's now the Ordos region of China. And Xuan could be part of a name or a title.
So this seal connects the fortress to a specific region within the Han Empire. That's a pretty big deal, right?
Yeah, it really strengthens the idea that Bayanbulag was a Han Dynasty outpost. And it even potentially links it to a fortress mentioned in historical records called Shuxiancheng, which means fortification for receiving surrender.
Wow. So this seemingly insignificant clay seal could be the key to identifying this fortress and placing it within the broader context of the Han Dynasty's military expansion.
It's amazing what a small artifact can reveal, isn't it?
It really is. Now let's shift our focus to the mass grave itself. Where was it found in relation to the fortress, and what was the initial impression of the site?
The mass grave was found about 150 meters southwest of the main fortress excavations, near a bend in a small stream. When they started excavating, it was immediately clear that this was no ordinary burial site. The bones were all jumbled together. It was a chaotic scene.
So not a carefully arranged burial then, more like bodies hastily thrown into a pit.
That's the impression, yes. And the archaeologists didn't find any evidence of individual graves or any kind of ritualistic burial practices. It was all very haphazard.
You mentioned earlier that there were signs of violence on the remains. What kind of injuries were observed, and what can we deduce about the cause of death for these individuals?
Yeah, so many of the skeletons showed evidence of blunt force trauma, like crushing injuries to the skull and other bones. There were also cut marks on the bones, suggesting sharp force trauma, possibly from swords or other weapons.
And those injuries, they were inflicted around the time of death, not afterward.
That's what the analysis suggests, yes. These weren't injuries sustained after death from animals or the environment. They were inflicted while these people were still alive.
Which paints a pretty horrific picture of their final moments. They were clearly victims of violence, a massacre of some sort.
It seems very likely. And the fact that the bodies were just dumped into this pit without any care or ceremony suggests that whoever killed them didn't want them to be found or remembered. Maybe they wanted to erase any trace of their existence.
So we've got a mass grave near a Han Dynasty fortress, and the victims show signs of a brutal and violent death. But how can we be sure that these were Han soldiers? Couldn't they have been Xiongnu warriors who were killed and dumped there by the Han?
That's a good question. And it's where the genetic analysis comes in. By analyzing the DNA from the skeletal remains, researchers were able to get a clearer picture of who these people were.
And what did the DNA tell them?
Well, first of all, they were able to extract DNA from 14 of the individuals, and all 14 were male.
Okay, so an all-male group. That definitely fits the profile of a military unit. But does their DNA specifically link them to the Han Dynasty?
Yes, it does. When they compared the genetic profiles of these individuals to other ancient populations from the region, they found the closest matches with people who lived in the Yellow River Basin in China. Specifically, groups associated with what's known as late Neolithic northern China. The genetic markers clearly differentiate them from the Xiongnu or other nomadic groups from further north.
So genetically speaking, these individuals were more closely related to the Han Chinese than to any other group in the region. That's pretty compelling evidence, wouldn't you say?
It is, but the genetic analysis went even further. They also looked at specific markers on the Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA, which are passed down through paternal and maternal lines, respectively. And these markers, they're like fingerprints for ancestral lineages, and they revealed a fascinating mix of genetic heritage within this group.
Oh, so it wasn't just a homogeneous group of Han Chinese soldiers. There was some diversity in their ancestry.
That's right. Some of the individuals carry genetic markers that are more commonly found in populations from the Western steppe, like the Scythians.
Interesting. So there was some mixing of genes between these different groups over time.
Exactly. And it highlights the fact that these ancient populations weren't completely isolated. There was movement and interaction between different groups, even across vast distances.
Okay, so the genetics paint a complex but fascinating picture of these individuals. They were predominantly of Han Chinese ancestry, but with hints of genetic mixing from other groups. What about their diet? Can we learn anything about their lifestyle from what they ate?
We can, thanks to isotopic analysis. By looking at the ratios of different isotopes of elements like strontium and carbon in the teeth, we can learn about where people lived and what they ate.
And what did the isotopic analysis of these individuals reveal?
So the strontium isotope ratios in their teeth were different from what you'd expect to find in people who grew up in Mongolia. They were much more consistent with the strontium isotope ratios found in regions of North China, like the Central Plains.
So this supports the idea that they were not local to Mongolia. They came from further south, which aligns with what we know about Han Dynasty military recruitment.
Exactly. And the carbon isotope analysis tells a similar story. It shows that these individuals ate a diet that was rich in C3 plants, like wheat, and C4 plants, like millet. This type of mixed agricultural diet was typical of people living in North China during the Han Dynasty.
Which contrasts sharply with the diet of the nomadic Xiongnu, who primarily ate meat and dairy products.
Absolutely. So both the strontium and carbon isotopes point to a North Chinese origin and an agricultural lifestyle for these individuals.
Wow. It's incredible how much information we can glean from these tiny traces left behind in their teeth. It really brings their story to life.
It's truly remarkable, isn't it?
So let's put it all together. What's the overall picture that emerges from all this evidence? Who were these people, and how did they end up in that mass grave?
Well, when we consider everything together, the archaeological context, the signs of violence, the genetic data, the isotopic analysis, it all points to the same conclusion. These individuals were most likely Han Dynasty soldiers who were killed in a violent confrontation, probably with the Xiongnu, and then dumped into a hastily dug pit.
And the fact that their bodies were treated with such disrespect, no proper burial or ceremony, it really speaks to the brutality of war and the dehumanizing nature of conflict.
Yes, it reminds us that behind these historical events, there were real people who lived and died, and their stories are often forgotten or overlooked.
But thanks to the study, their story is being told, and we're gaining a deeper understanding of the human cost of these ancient conflicts. And the fact that this discovery is linked to the Xiongnu seal and potentially to the historically documented fortress of Shuxiangcheng, it adds another layer of intrigue and historical significance to this find, doesn't it?
It does. It suggests that this wasn't just a random skirmish. This might have been a significant event in the ongoing struggle between the Han Dynasty and the Xiongnu for control of this strategically important region.
It really highlights the challenges of maintaining control over such a vast and contested frontier. And the study also mentions that the strontium isotope variations among the soldiers suggest that they might have come from different regions within North China.
That's right. It provides a glimpse into the logistical complexities of Han military recruitment. They were drawing soldiers from various parts of the empire to defend this distant frontier.
Which makes sense given the scale of the Han Dynasty and the vast distances involved. It was a truly imperial undertaking, requiring resources and manpower from across their vast territory.
Absolutely.
So what are the key takeaways from this study? What's the big aha moment for you?
For me, the biggest takeaway is the power of interdisciplinary research. By combining different scientific techniques, we've been able to piece together the story of these individuals and gain a much clearer understanding of a pivotal moment in history. And the fact that we can now potentially link this mass grave to a specific fortress mentioned in historical records, that's truly remarkable.
It really is. We started with a jumbled pile of bones and ended up with a detailed glimpse into the lives and deaths of these ancient soldiers. And it raises some really interesting questions too, doesn't it? I mean, if this one site has revealed so much, what other secrets are waiting to be uncovered along this ancient frontier? What other stories are hidden beneath the surface, just waiting for us to find them?
That's a great point. There's so much we still don't know about the past. But with every new discovery, with every new piece of evidence, we get a little bit closer to understanding who these people were, how they lived, and how they died.
It's a reminder that history isn't just about dates and battles. It's about real people and their stories. And it's up to us to keep searching, keep questioning, and keep uncovering those stories.
Couldn't agree more.
And on that note, the study ends with a sobering reminder about the importance of protecting these archaeological sites. They're facing a constant threat from looting, which destroys valuable historical information and robs us of the opportunity to learn from the past.
It's a sad reality, but it's one we need to be aware of. These sites are fragile and irreplaceable. They're windows into the past, and we need to do everything we can to preserve them for future generations.
Well said. I hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and given you a new appreciation for the power of archaeology and the importance of protecting our shared human heritage. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the past. Until next time, keep exploring.
See you next time.